Welcome to the 2012 Candidates Forum. I'm Ann Whitman, the program monitor. This segment features the candidates running for state representative in the 85th Assembly District. The format will be as follows. The first part of the program will consist of questions asked of the candidates by members of the local media, including the New Haven Register, the Record Journal, and students from Mark T. Sheehan High School. The second part will allow each candidate to make a closing statement. During the question and answer portion of the program, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. The opposing candidate will then be allowed 1 minute for rebuttal. To conclude the program, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make closing statements. A toss of the coin has determined the order of questioning. Before beginning the questioning, I'd like to introduce the candidates running for the state representative in the 85th Assembly District. They are Gregory Bachand, Republican; Mary Mushinsky, Democrat. Russell Blair of the Record Journal will ask the first question of Mary Mushinsky.
Good evening, Mary.
Evening, Russell.
My first question is this. My first question is an issue that's been cropping up locally, both in Wallingford and the surrounding towns. In the Quinnipiac River watershed is the issue of the phosphorus regulations, state and federal, and then they come with a cost of millions of dollars. And some of the towns have joined a coalition, and they're trying to make it so they don't have to undergo such extensive upgrades to their water treatment plant. My question for you is, how do you find that balance between the cost to the municipalities and then also protecting the river, protecting the environment, and lowering the phosphorus levels?
I do think technology is going to save us on this question. First, the requirement is coming from the federal government, from US EPA, and they determined with scientific research that rivers cannot meet water quality standards unless phosphorus is removed, and it's up to 66 times natural levels down here in our end of the state. And so it will have to be removed in order to remove the problem of over-fertilization leading to oxygen depletion. They set a deadline for compliance, and the legislature responded by passing a bill to give more input from the municipalities to the DEEP and EPA. And we also changed the formula for reimbursement so that the towns can get 30% grant for removing phosphorus. Now that's 30% leaving 70% to be covered. I think more time for the municipalities and technology will solve this problem. In Cheshire right now, the town is working on a disc treatment to remove phosphorus from the water. It is very successful on a small scale, and what they have to do now is ramp it up to a large scale. They believe it'll be cost effective. So more time, good technology should allow us to solve this problem at a more reasonable cost.
Mr. Bachand?
Thank you. First of all, I am for zero unfunded mandates. Whether it's the DEEP or the federal government or the governor or the legislature, the idea that some higher government can impose an obligation, a mandate on Wallingford to spend $19 million without providing us the $19 million is not sensible. In point of fact, as to the phosphorus, when Mary Mushinsky talks about the level of water quality, she's talking about some standard that was set by some bureaucrats. When they talk about how much phosphorus we have to get to, they're talking about something that was set by the DEEP. They can determine that number. Why should we spend $19 million? You know what the effect's going to be? We're going to have to borrow that money, and getting a grant from the state doesn't do any good because that's just our money going to the state and coming back down. We have to spend $19 million, and that money has to be funded from your sewer tax, has to be added to the bill, a 32%.
Mr. Bachand, that's your time. The next question, Eric Tiedemann of Mark Titian High School asks of Gregory Bachand.
Hello, Mr. Bachand.
How are you?
Good. What specific proposals would you suggest that will address Connecticut's problems in terms of transportation? What would you support major investments in increased services for rail or bus commuter systems?
No. Rail and bus is an inefficient method of moving people from here to there. I'm for spending money on road infrastructure. I'm for spending money on bridges. I'm for borrowing money to do that because we're going to use those facilities for 30 or 40 years and they're going to make sense because hundreds of thousands of cars are going to use them. But when we support things like the busway to nowhere up in northern Connecticut, or even the Wallingford bus, we are funding huge amounts of money for very few riders. Now, I want to go back to the last question because on the phosphorus issue, the impact is going to be that we are going to have to add 32% to everybody's sewer bill for the next 20 years to pay for it. That means if you pay $100 a quarter for your sewer bill, for the next 20 years, you're going to pay $132 per quarter. And I am against unfunded mandates. And I am against buses and trains to nowhere. That will be huge burdens on our economy.
Thank you. The next question will be of John.
Do I forget to talk about the
I'm sorry, Mary.
transportation? Okay. I am in full support of the high-speed rail for the I-91 corridor, which will go through Wallingford. We will have a new train station north of the current one. It will rejuvenate the downtown of Wallingford, which is kind of sleepy right now. It'll bring young professionals to live there near the railroad station. What will follow them is economic development. You'll have shops, you'll have coffee shops, restaurants, stores for them to purchase things to go on the train. And wherever this has been done, it has rejuvenated economic development around the high-speed rail route. And I think it will here in Wallingford too. We also need to keep our local bus. There are people in Wallingford who are unable to drive on their own. They're elderly or they're disabled. They need the bus to get to their medical appointments and to get across town, and we should keep that as well.
Thank you. The next question is from Jonathan Partisano of Mark Titian High School of Mary Mushinsky.
Hello, Ms. Mushinsky.
Hi, Jonathan.
Would you favor a change in the way the state of Connecticut lays and collects taxes? For example, would you repeal the sales tax and increase or modify the income tax?
No, I'm on the Finance Committee, Finance, Revenue, and Bonding. We always analyze the neighboring states before we do any change in our taxes. We are aware that it's a small state surrounded by other states, and we are aware we have to be competitive. We don't want anyone leaving our borders for elsewhere, so we do study the tax rates, both sales tax and income tax, to stay competitive with the other states. And we did that in recent years. We did check again to make sure we were competitive, and we are. I'd say the only state where there's a parity or close to parity is with Massachusetts on the sales tax, and it's a very small number, not enough to go over the border unless you're in a border town and the dividing line is right on your street. But for somebody from Wallingford, there would not really be a difference.
Thank you.
Regarding the sales tax and the income tax, I think they're both way too high. I would lower the sales tax, I would lower the income tax. To achieve parity or to look at other states and get as close as we can to them without going over is not a way to run government. We ought to become the most dynamic, low-cost, low-tax state in the region. We should be a lot lower than New York, a lot lower than Massachusetts, a lot lower than Rhode Island, and the net effect of that is that businesses and people would pour into this state. And from that will come more businesses, more jobs, and more taxes, so revenue will actually go up. I'm for lowering both.
Thank you. Luther Trammell of the New Haven Register will ask the next question of Gregory Bachand.
Mr. Bachand, you seem to have a viewpoint that state government should have a limited role in the lives of everyday citizens. Can you describe in as much detail as you can get in 90 seconds about what should be dealt with at the state level and what should be dealt with at the local level?
Well, there's a couple philosophies that I would employ here. First of all, I believe in private enterprise over government entities. And so everything that can be privatized should. Secondly, I believe the government ought to be as small as possible and let capitalism do its thing. Because the net result is the difference between excuse me, West Berlin and East Berlin. If you remember those famous pictures back in the 60s, when West Berlin was just bright and vibrant and full of lights, and East Berlin was dark and dank. Why? Because they tried to have a regulated big government economy in East Berlin, and they had a vibrant, hands-off capitalist society in West Berlin. That's what we ought to do with Connecticut. If we do so, if we lower to the very smallest level all of the services and things that we provide, then that will allow people to keep more taxes in their pocket. When they have more taxes in their pocket, they spend more. When they spend more, businesses grow. When businesses grow, more employees are hired and more taxes are ultimately paid.
The next question.
I think the... can I come?
Doing that to you, sorry.
That's okay. I'll just kick the table or something. I think educational standards need to be set by the state. We need to have a workforce that is ready to compete in the global economy. You have to have some basic set of standards that all students meet in Connecticut in order to be successful. The state also needs to put up some of the money for education. The state needs to do the intertown roads, interstate roads, and transportation, and also maintain health care and a safety net for vulnerable people, especially in a recession like we have now. The constituents were really clear about that when they responded to my survey. Locally, the decisions are education, hiring and firing, school systems, how many schools, one high school versus 2 high schools, that sort of decision, local roads, management of local projects. So I think there is a role for both, and some things are done more efficiently on the larger scale.
The next question is from Eric Tiedemann to Mary Mushinsky.
Mary Mushinsky, if you are re-elected, how will you make Connecticut more affordable for young people who are recent graduates of colleges and live and work in the state?
One of the ways is the transit-oriented development. We build in more density near a transit route so that you don't need your car as often and your housing expenditure is not as great. The parcel of land is not as large. When people become more successful, they often will move out to a larger parcel. But for people just starting out, paying off their loans and starting their career, a smaller unit in the downtown is actually a desirable thing. And they can become self-sufficient economically, and then if they wish, they can move further out into a bigger parcel.
One thing that we know from looking, for example, at the DMV is the government can't plan anything. So when legislators start saying, well, we can force young people to live in town by making those houses cheaper, and we'll put it near some sort of rail that goes somewhere but probably not to where their job is, and we waste a lot of money doing that. That causes us to raise our taxes and put a burden on everybody. We've got to get government out of the business of planning how young people can afford anything and let young people figure it out. Kids coming out of the UConn system are well-trained, well-educated. They'll find a way to make it work. And I would let capitalism once again do its thing.
The next question is from Jonathan Partisano of Gregory Bachand.
What specific proposals do you have to make our state more energy efficient? Would you support more green technology or a return to nuclear power plants as a possible solution?
Good question. I'm a big nuclear power plant fan. I am against almost all green energy. plan after plan after plan, company after company after company that the government has poured millions of dollars in has gone belly up. Just this week, another couple $100 million investment by the federal government into a car battery company went under. Solyndra was a big story at the federal level. The state is also wasting lots of money trying to put solar panels on people's homes for big dollars to save just a little bit per month. The government should stay out of trying to figure out what is the best energy and let the marketplace figure it out. Right now, natural gas is coming on strong because of the shale drilling in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. That market's going to take care of itself. We also have a vibrant oil community here. Oil's a little high right now, and so gas is kind of catching up to it. But nuclear energy would also be another solution. And part of the solution, I've got to stop you, because that's the second time you've done that. I think you're holding up the wrong cards.
No, you have 1 more minute to talk.
Okay, thank you. I believe that the government, as in all things, ought to stay out of it, let capitalism take its place, and the most vibrant community of capitalism will win out.
Thank you.
We have, in Wallingford, we have about 450 people who need fuel assistance. And when they get their first allotment, they call me and say, can I get more? I say, I'll see what I can do. So I know we have a need here for fuel efficiency. Short term, I would favor the fuel switching to natural gas, to extend the gas lines to areas of town that are not served right now so they can take advantage of half the price of oil. I'd like to do 10-year on-bill financing for energy improvements, both ceiling insulation, new, more efficient furnaces, and eventually solar hot water, which is cost-effective over the long term. We can easily do 20% savings with efficiency and technology in our homes and businesses, easily do it. And the state is already doing it with state agencies.
Thank you. The next question is from Luther Trammell to Mary Mushinsky.
Mary, twice already tonight, Mr. Bachand has cited his belief that government should get out of the way and let capitalism do what it does best. Let me pose this question to you, though. Can you cite, or what's your view of instances where unrestrained capitalism has failed the state of Connecticut in the past?
Sometimes I'm as big a fan of capitalism as he is, but sometimes capitalism holds back and they wait, and people need action quicker than they're willing to give action. For example, we had to pass the Step Up program in the budget, and Step Up means we subsidize young workers for the first 6 months of their hiring. The businesses were not willing to hire these young workers. They feel they have to train them for 6 months and it's not worth their investment, and it's a shaky economy, but these people need jobs. So we said, okay, we'll do the Step Up program. We will subsidize half of their paycheck for the first 6 months if you hire these young people. And they did, and it's already working. So that's a case where government had to dangle something in front of the capitalist system to get some response. We did get a response. They are hiring. They're happy with the new workers. It's really working. So that's occasionally you have to push them because they're reluctant to move on their own.
Well, you can dangle things in front of the capitalistic system all you want, but all it does in the end is unbalance the way it's supposed to work. And the problem with subsidizing this and giving a little help over here or a little incentive over there is the budget gets out of control. Since Mary Mushinsky took office, our budget has gone from $3 billion to $20 billion, while our population has gone from 3 million to 4 million. The budget is way out of control because of the attitude that we need to supplement and help and bribe everything we can think of to make it work better. The point of fact is, the way it works better is to lower taxes to the lowest possible level, provide a safety net and a safety net only, and let society manage itself.
The next question is from Russell Blair to Gregor Bachand.
Something I've heard from candidates running for office across the state is they talk to employers, and employers say they're hiring, they have positions open, but they can't find candidates in the state that meet the qualifications for those positions. What do you think state government can do or should do to sort of better train the workforce for the jobs that are available?
Other than the public school system and the university system, I don't think the state ought to do anything above and beyond that. When the government tries to start figuring out how many pipe fitters it needs or how many biotechnology engineers or scientists they need or whatever, and here's what they need to do to learn how to do their craft, it becomes a huge bureaucracy. The bureaucracy becomes a huge staff, which becomes huge benefits, huge salaries, and you get an infrastructure that can barely be moved. Capitalism figures all those things out. You know, there's a famous book by Milton Friedman that nobody knows how to make a pencil, and nobody does know how to make a pencil. You may know how to make the wood, you may know how to make the rubber up at the top, you may know how to make the lead, but you don't know how to get the lead from Africa to over here. You don't know how to get the lead to attach to the wood and so forth. Nobody knows how to do it. But the capitalistic system figures all that out because there's a money incentive. The government can't do it because there is no money incentive. There's only an incentive to control. And that's why it never, ever works, and why I would oppose the government in the state of Connecticut in particular trying to figure out how to better train employees. Let the private sector figure that out.
I would say it does work if the government is using it wisely, the investment wisely. Massachusetts has a lower unemployment rate than we do right now because they have a link between higher education and the job market. And we are setting one up now similarly. We have 1,400 VOTEC slots for manufacturing training that are filled. We have 600 unfilled. We're actually looking for more young people to fill these slots. And young people have been shying away from manufacturing because they think it's a dirty business, but it isn't. If you go into new technology firms now, they're very high tech. They're really beautiful to work in. It's very good wages, maybe $70,000 you can make. And it's a good marriage of education and jobs. So I'm on the Manufacturing and Advanced Manufacturing Caucus, and one of our jobs is to get young people into these slots where they will make very good money.
The next question is from Jonathan Partisano of Mary Mushinsky.
With the state union workers being a vital part of any budget, please explain how you would tell the union leadership that they must take less in pay and benefits in order to balance the state budget.
Well, actually, we did that last year, and there's a 20-year agreement. You are correct. They have to be part of the solution. And what they did was they're now contributing toward the pension, 3%. They have a 5-year delay in retirement. Can't take the cars home anymore. We had early retirements to reduce the number of people receiving benefits. We're trying to make the liabilities and the assets match up better on the pension fund so we don't have a balloon payment at the end. And they are contributing. So of the savings we did in the last budget, 1/3 of the savings were from the state employee unions. They did step up and they did contribute, which was admirable and necessary.
Well, they may have been 1/3 of the savings on paper, but they weren't in reality. Almost none of the proposed actions regarding the state unions actually came to save the state any money. The only thing, the big factor that actually helped was retirements not expected. There were many more retirements than expected under the early retirement benefit they were offered, which means, of course, that we gave too great a benefit for them to leave. And when we saved all of that money because they retired, we really transferred it off budget and increased our unfunded liabilities on the pension side. The state is $60 billion in debt. Only $17 billion of it is for things like bridges and roads and infrastructure and so forth. The rest is unfunded teacher benefits, unfunded state union benefits. We're not doing anything close to what we need to do to get that under control.
The next question is from Luther Turmel to Gregory Bachand.
Mr. Bachand, I'd like to go back to the comment you made a little earlier about you don't favor mass transit. You'd prefer to see more money invested in bridges and roads. In the last decade, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association touted a study, I don't know whether they sponsored it or not, but where transportation planners talked about the state of Connecticut becoming a cul-de-sac for business transportation if there wasn't more investment in mass transportation. Is there not a happy medium, or as far as you're concerned, when it comes to using some kind of public or mass transportation to get cars off the roads?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily be interested in getting cars off the road for getting cars off the road's sake, because it's more fun to drive your own car someplace and be able to get right to where you're going than to take mass transit, have to get off and take a cab or walk or take another bus or whatever it may be. I'm for mass transit when you're looking at an environment like Lower Fairfield County, the Metro North trains. I'm supportive of that. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of revenue. It doesn't quite meet what it should in terms of revenue, but it's close enough. But when you have 2 buses running around Wallingford all day with just a couple of people in them at a time, when the city was $120,000 in debt this year and had to raise the mill rate, $60,000 of it alone could have been saved by the not doing the bus subsidy. There was another $90,000 the state had to throw in, and that didn't include the cost of the bus. That didn't include the unfunded mandates of the pension plan of those 2 drivers that go back and forth with so few people in it. I'm for ending all kinds of subsidies that a normal private business would have done. At one time, railroads were the best industry in America. There's a reason that no private industry's in those businesses today, because they don't work. People don't want to go from point A to point B because they live at point C and they work at point D. That's the problem. They simply don't work in this environment, and they are too expensive, and I would halt all of those subsidies except for the major ones that I talked about, like the Metro North Railroad.
Congestion hurts business growth. The business community has certainly made that crystal clear to us. It hurts their ability to get the product to market. We had a wake-up call when one of the agricultural businesses left the state for Pennsylvania, and they were a big mushroom growing operation. And they said the reason we left is every time we try to ship our product out, which is a fragile product, we can't get to the markets quick enough. And our workers can't come in because they get stuck on 95 and they're just stuck there. So we've had it. We're going to Pennsylvania. So we know that we have to reduce congestion on 91, 95, and 84 in order to improve business and markets. Business community has told us this, and they will stay here and thrive if we can help them reduce the congestion through public transit. I do think people will adjust to it and do their work on the public transit, and when they get to work, they'll be refreshed and have some work done already, and maybe even eat their breakfast.
Thank you.
Transit.
The next question is from Russell Blair to Mary Mushinsky.
Mary, what do you think the biggest challenge the General Assembly will face in the next 2 years is?
Unquestionably, it'll be the budget. We do see continued weak growth in the economy, and if that continues weakly, the revenues will be under where we need to be. We also have an increase in Medicaid costs higher than we expected. We do think we'll have to make some changes, ask for a waiver from the federal government to do an asset test on our Medicaid low-income group in order to get that under control. And that would be the main thing, the budget and the keeping Medicaid under control. We talked earlier about those parts of the budget that are rise faster than inflation, and medical care is one of them. So that one will have to be watched, and we will have to adjust Medicaid.
I totally agree that the budget is going to be the #1 issue for the next 2 years. The problem is that the Democratic supermajority keeps raising taxes. The more you raise taxes, the less business you get. The less business you get, the less employment you get. And of course, one of our biggest problems is unemployment insurance. And once you have unemployment insurance going along, that also means that you have Medicaid benefits growing. You have food stamp, not a state issue, but federal issue, food stamp issues growing. In other words, the solution for the next 2 years, the next 20 years, is to increase employment, and you increase employment by having the best tax environment in the area. That's what you need to do.
The next question is from Eric Tiedemann to Gregory Bachand.
What is your plan to attract new businesses to Connecticut and retain the current businesses that reside in our state?
The first thing I would do is not bribe the current businesses to stay. I believe that we ought to create an environment where they want to stay. And in point of fact, I think they do. Paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund down in Stamford so that they can have a new building in Westport to have a new building in Stamford wouldn't be the way I'd go about it. I'd lower probably half the income tax. I'd lower probably half the sales tax. I would eliminate most of the corporate tax and make us a nirvana for businesses throughout the region. Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island will never do it. And therefore, those businesses and those people and those jobs will just pour in here. And the more they pour in here, the more those businesses will grow. And the less the sales tax, the more people have in their pocket to spend. And once they have it to spend, they do, and business grows, and they hire more employees, and we have lower and lower Medicaid, lower and lower unemployment, lower and lower use of food stamps, and so forth. It's a vicious circle going badly with a Democratic supermajority, and it could be a vicious circle going the right way with proper tax policy.
The business community has said to me that their biggest issues are energy, cost of energy in Connecticut, and shortage of skilled workers to fit the types of technology they're doing. We have some very successful businesses in Connecticut who could hire workers to make high value added products, but they can't get them right now. One thing we're doing is, on the energy side, to help these businesses switch to gas from oil. It's a high heating oil state. It's more dependent on oil than any other New England state. So we have to make that change right away and help them switch over to gas. We have to help them with more efficient technology so that they are saving and being as productive as they can be. It should reduce their costs by about half. They do cite energy costs as one of the problems of New England. And then on the workers, we have to recruit more young people to advanced manufacturing. We need to put, we've already started doing this, but we need to put manufacturers on the VOTEC boards, governing boards.
The last round, Luther Trammell will ask the first question of Mary Mushinsky.
Mary, if there was such a thing as a budget czar in the state of Connecticut, and you were the budget czar, can you point to 3 or 4 areas in the state budget that you believe could be cut either modestly or moderately?
Well, I would probably take a look at the ones that are increasing faster than the rate of inflation. One of them is, or was, corrections. We were incarcerating too many people and spending $50,000 per person to incarcerate them. What we're doing now is putting some people in who have mental health issues in the mental health system. We're doing alternative punishments for some of these folks and home arrest for some of the nonviolent people. But corrections is very expensive, and reducing that cost is one way of saving money. More contributions by state employees to the pension system will help reduce the growth of the, or reduce the liability of the pension system. And then on Medicaid, which is probably the fastest rising item in the budget, not only the assets test, but at some point we will have to decide whether we pay for medical technology that is not effective. And if it isn't, we probably should not reimburse for that medical technology.
Well, what would I cut if I was the czar? The first thing I'd start with is the defined benefit plan that the state employees have. The annual contribution to the state defined benefit plan is 17% of salary. If salaries are about 9 or 10 billion, that's 1.7 billion. The problem is we're not even funding it properly. The biggest item in the debt of our state is unfunded pension liabilities we haven't even encountered yet. We have to convert that plan like Xerox did and IBM did and every other major corporation to a defined contribution 401k plan. And that'll save immediately lots of money. Now, everybody who has a benefit so far accrued would get that benefit. We promised them that, they get that. But going forward, we've got to stop the unfunded mandate, the unfunded actuarial costs going forward. And that would be where I'd start. I'd tell you more, but I've run out of time.
The next question is from Russell Blair to Gregory Bachand.
Greg, a big part of your campaign is saying no. You say you'll go up to Hartford and you'll be the one to say no. Right. But how would you hope to achieve some of these things you'd like to do, whether it's cutting income tax, cutting the sales tax, by saying no without bipartisan support? How would you kind of go about working to get some of these initiatives done?
I tell everybody that I probably won't get any of it done. The problem is that Mary says yes to everything, so she's part of the majority. She votes about 97% of the time with the majority. The problem is the majority says yes to everything. I would go up to Hartford and hoot and holler about basic principles of government. I would get in front of the press and I would make a scene, if you will, a legislative scene about there's another paradigm of government that we're not trying, and that is the paradigm of lowering all of our taxes and increasing the capitalistic fervor in Connecticut so that growth is organic and not mandated by some government. So I've told everybody my name is Gregory N. Bachand, and by the way, I thank you for this question. My name is Gregory N. Bachand. The N stands for no, and the only thing I'll approve is lowering taxes.
I'm on I served on a bipartisan cost-cutting commission called the Commission on Enhancing Agency Outcomes, and it was both Democrats and Republicans. We came up with a cut list of more than $400 million. We are working our way through that list. Some of it has already been implemented, and some is going to be implemented. It is a bipartisan approach. The best ideas are bipartisan, I think, and my committee is bipartisan. That 98% figure is a little misleading in that if you look at any typical Republican, they are also voting 98% with their leadership. The difference between the two parties is really only about 20%. There is same votes on both sides of the aisle for about 75% of the budget of the issues we deal with, and there's maybe a 20% difference. It's mostly around budget priorities.
The next question is from Eric Tiedemann to Mary Mushinsky.
What would you do to get the state of Connecticut to fund more adequately fund more education in Wallingford?
Just to be honest with you, Eric, just to hang on to the money we have was a real struggle. It was a fight just to keep the $23.4 million for Wallingford, most of which is for education. At one point last year when we were in the budget fight, there was a proposal to cut municipal aid by $50 million or $54 million, and we wouldn't do it. We said the towns are expecting it, and it would be really wrong to come in the middle of the year and cut it. So we instead got more concessions from state employees to make up the difference, but we were not willing to cut town aid. So I hesitate to promise more when it was really difficult to hang on to the town aid that the mayor and the council were expecting.
My answer to that question is that we've got to get to the fundamental problem with the educational funding, which is that the local boards of education, including the Board of Education in Wallingford, does not have the leeway to do what they want to do to educate the children the way that the local residents, see fit. When we take $2 million from the federal government to hire some sort of specialist or something, and a couple years later the federal government pulls that money back, state law says we can't lower that amount, that budget. We have to keep the same budget. That's crazy. And so we get these high budgets that have to be funded by the state, which of course comes from us anyway, and we have a problem. And you're way too young to know this. You've never seen this, but your dad or maybe your granddad, who's as old as I am, maybe 60 years old. When we were in school, there was a principal and there were teachers, and every teacher was in front of the students. Today, there's layers and layers of vice principals and special project coordinators and special subject coordinators and all kinds of people who never get in front of a student. And the Board of Education can't do anything about it. We have to get to a point where the Board of Education has the ability to bring that down. And if elected, I will do all I can to do so.
Thank you. And the last question of Jonathan Partisano of Gregory Bachand.
The state of Connecticut has pension obligations that are underfunded and in danger of not being able to pay its retirees in the future. What do you propose to do to remedy this situation?
I would convert all defined benefit state plans to a defined contribution plan, a 401k type plan. I happen to have been in my early life an ERISA attorney. ERISA is the law that controls pension plans, and I know a lot about unfunded actuarial assumptions and so forth. We're assuming 8%, but we're only earning 2 or 3. We're assuming a certain turnover rate that doesn't take place, and even with all those assumptions, we are running way behind, 30, 40, $50 billion behind in our pension funding. We have to correct that by going to a defined contribution plan like almost every private employer has done. Why? Because when you hire somebody who's 20 years old and he makes $20,000, you start funding it, but by the time he's 40, he's making $100,000. By the time he's 60, he's making $200,000. And the time to fund that is smaller and smaller and smaller. And you can't fund it or you go bust, which is exactly what's happening to Connecticut, which, by the way, is exactly what's happening to Greece and France and England. There's no magic here. We have to fund on an ongoing basis, and that's what I would do both to the defined benefit plans for state employees, but also their health plans, which are carried right through retirement and everything else.
I think we've already taken the first step, and we will continue to do this as the budgets will remain tight for the foreseeable future. We have required state employees to contribute to their pension plan at a higher rate than they had. We have changed the retirement age, and we are attempting to control the medical part of the benefits as well, so it's more manageable and more predictable. I think my opponent is correct in that the old system is gone, it's not coming back, and people will be part of their own retirement and will be a major player in their own retirement.
Thank you. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes to make a closing statement. Mr. Bachand, if you'd please begin.
I've got to tell you, I've had a ball here tonight. If you go to Bachand.com, you'll see that I love to participate in the exchange of ideas. If you understand that this is a very important election, you get some perspective. This is an important election for the state and the town. In fact, this election, the 85th, your choice is clear. I'm for less government. Mary Mushinsky's not. I'm for lower taxes. Mary Mushinsky's not. I'm for less regulation. Mary Mushinsky's not. I'm for less bureaucracy, less spending, and 0 unfunded mandates. Mary Mushinsky's not. I'm for having the bad guys spend all their time that they're supposed to in prison with no early release. I'm for reinstating the death penalty. I'm for fully funding the state police. Mary Mushinsky's not. Now, how do we know what Mary Mushinsky stands for? Because we have 32 years of evidence that she's for bigger government, higher taxes, more bureaucracy, more regulation, higher salaries for the bureaucracy, and bigger benefits. In point of fact, state government spending has increased 700% during Mary's tenure, but the state population's only gone up 25%. And Mary Mushinsky's voted for every dime of it. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "What you do speaks so loudly, it doesn't matter what you say." In the same vein, Mary Mushinsky's voting record speaks so loudly, it frankly doesn't matter what she said here tonight. We have an obligation to the people of Wallingford to keep our expenses down. I have never in this campaign said a negative word about Mary Mushinsky because she has been a consistent public servant. For 32 years, she has served the people of Wallingford. The problem is, for most of those years, she's been a representative from the Quinnipiac River, not Wallingford. It's time for Wallingford to get its representation back. So I want to thank you for tonight. I want to thank you for supporting me for the last few months. I want to thank you for waving at me at those intersections you see me at. I want to thank you for the answering the knock at the door. I've had a ball during this entire campaign. Most importantly, I want to thank you for participating in democracy. And with that in mind, I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Ms. Mushinsky?
My opponent is right about one thing. This is a clear choice between the two of us. My opponent is a Tea Party aficionado. He looks at numbers, not at people. I am a people person. My approach is to listen to the public, to do surveys when there are difficult budget choices, and to door knock to find out what they think. And this is what my constituents said to me in the surveys. They said, we want you to protect our families and the community. We want to keep the veteran services. We want to keep health benefits for seniors. We want to keep education funding, municipal aid, so our property taxes don't go up. We want you to protect fuel assistance and the housing authority subsidy for the renters. We want you to invest in job creation. We have a high unemployment rate. And we did that. We did Small Business Express to help the small businesses in their efforts to expand and hire. We did angel investor tax credits to link innovators with investors to create new businesses in Connecticut, very successful. We brought biomedical research to the Central Connecticut corridor, which will employ people at good salaries. We put money in to retrain veterans as they come back from the war so they can do a good job and earn a good wage. And we invested heavily in manufacturing training for the new technology that will be the future of our state. My constituents asked me to cut costs, and that's exactly what I've been doing on program review and investigations, which is my primary job. We cut $2 for every $1 that we raised. On the Commission on Enhancing Agency Outcomes, we came up with $400 million worth of cuts. We reduced state employment by 2,700 people and a 6% drop in the number of employees. Employees pay into their pension, and we delayed their retirement. The constituents asked me to work in a bipartisan way to make things better for the state. And that's what I have done. On my committee, we have the same number of Democrats as Republicans. We have rotating chairmen. One is a Republican, one is a Democrat. We work very well together. We worked on aligning education with the workforce. We worked on new economic development for the state to work on the state's assets to hire people. And we did it in a bipartisan way. The job bill passed unanimously bipartisan. So this is what I've done, what my constituents asked me to do, and if I go back again with their support and help with your vote, I will do more of the same. Thank you for your trust, and I hope I will be working on the same issues next year.
Thank you. This concludes the 85th Assembly District segment of the 2012 Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to vote on November 6th.